invited to pull up a chair on Lisa Harper's Back Porch, where faith meets real life. Welcome to Back Porch Theology. Each episode helps you dive deeper into God's Word and discover that the gospel isn't just good news for eternity. It's great news for everyday life, because God is for you, and He's always been restoring our value and drawing us closer to Him. With honest conversations, a few laughs, and guests ranging from close friends to brilliant theologians, Back Porch Theology is thoughtful, meaningful, and never stuffy. So grab some coffee or sweet tea and join Lisa Harper on Back Porch Theology. Subscribe now wherever you listen to podcasts.
Well, hi everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and I'm so excited that you're joining us today. We are going to have a fascinating conversation as usual as we learn from people all around the world at all ages and stages of life. Stay tuned as we shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort.
Here we go. What you think about, you will bring about dementia change. We will.
Hi everyone, welcome to Alzheimer Speaks. I'm Lori LeBay, and I'll be your host today on our podcast, where you're going to be talking about what caregiving taught Andrew about dementia and why he feels the system is broken, and how and why he built blueBell to improve that system. So it'll be a very interesting conversation, talking from the heart, and someone who's actually experienced the journey, I think, is always so important as well. But before I introduce you to Andrew, I want to encourage you to check out alzheimerspeaks.com. We have a ton of free educational resources we've been curating since 2009, and we'd hate you to miss any of those, as well as our sister company, dementiamap.com, where you can search resources around the world and you can add yours in there too. We have 150 categories. We're growing it slowly, but we invite you to join us. And there's no cost. There's no password you have to set up on either of those. They're just free to explore. So let's go ahead and meet the founder of blueBell. Well, Andrew, I'm so excited to have you with us on Alzheimer Speak. So first of all, thanks for your time. I know you're a busy guy, but really excited to have this conversation and talk about all you're doing. So again, thank you.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the invitation.
I would like to start by you kind of setting the stage of who's Andrew, and how'd you get into this space?
Yeah, it's interesting, Lori. I never really wanted to end up in health. It was never something that I sought out to choose. So I'm an engineer by trade. I worked oil and gas industry for a decade. I did engineering work for some of the largest refineries around the world, and that was my background. That was my history. It wasn't until my grandmother's Alzheimer's journey that I really ended up in this space. Funny fact is that when I was doing my MBA, there was different career tracks, career streams, and I was nominated to be the lead for the health and public policy career stream. And at that time, I went, no. I want nothing to do with this. I want to continue running my consulting company and doing engineering stuff, and that's what I want to do. But they're like, you need to do this thing. I said, no. So I refused to do it. And looking back many years later, I'm like, interesting how that happens. But yeah, to get back to how I got into this, my grandmother had Alzheimer's, and like many, I watched how the system, existed around my grandmother, what supports were there, what supports were not there, how the hired teams looking after my grandmother. And it really gave me an idea of what stuff was missing. Oftentimes care is, let's fit the round person into a square hole. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want that. That's not something that resonates with me. It's not what I would want for someone I love. And so in that, it kind of led me down a trajectory of, I need to do something different. I am, fundamentally kind of stubborn and wanting to to make change. I was like, I'm going to do this for my grandmother, and I am going to make my grandmother's lived experience different. So my company is called blueBell Village. It's named after my grandmother. So my grandmother's name was Shirley Bell. Her favorite color was blue, and her favorite place to be in was her garden and with her flowers. So the company blueBell, you'll notice that the B in the middle of the bell part is capital in honor of my grandmother and her legacy. This company was made as a way for me to try and support my grandmother. Initially, we started with the idea like, let's build a dementia village. The idea of the Hogevik in the Netherlands or the village Langley in BC. Like, there's a couple really, really good dementia villages around the world. There's about 12 right now in total. They're kind of running that model in different ways. But I was like, let's do it here, because I wanted to build something for my grandmother. I wanted to try and build one that we could put my grandmother in that would be appropriate and supportive of her needs. We worked on that pursuit for a few years, and like a lot of things that happened around COVID times, it got complicated, right? We all know what happened in the world, not just regulatory things. We also had cost of building challenges. We had issues with interest rates, like everything compounded to make this a lofty, say, stretch goal into something that just ended up being unsustainable in the economic climate that was Alberta at the time. Um, and all the while that was going on, we had my grandmother who was being cared for by many people in my family, but she was also being cared for by uh, home and companion care organizations. And I was watching them, and they were doing the best that they could. They honestly they were trying their best, and I appreciated that so much. But I was noticing that they weren't necessarily communicating. They weren't necessarily understanding what each other was doing. One companion care organization or person wasn't talking to what the home care people were doing. They had no idea what each other was doing. Um, as a family, we were trying to collect all the pieces, and my aunt was doing an amazing job of trying to collect everyone and move us all together in an orderly fashion towards a common unified goal. But everyone's kind of doing their own thing, and I'm like, this is crazy. Why are we not working together towards a common, cohesive objective, right? Many hands make light work. If we're all working in opposite directions, it's not going to end well. So I noticed that with my grandmother, and that I also noticed that my other grandmother was born on reserve. So my grandmother she passed away now, was a member of the Muskeg Lake Cree Nation, and so am I, and so am my dad. And so we're First Nations. She was born on reserve, and her lived experience would have been fundamentally different than my grandmother living with Alzheimer's. And I just looked at the experience that my grandmother was going through. I said, okay, why is the system forcing everyone to go through it this one way? Why do we not have all these organizations, all these people approach the people that they're caring for properly? One of the lenses of ethics is duty of care. So we have this ethical framework that says that we need to care and what is the ethical manner to care is the thing that is appropriate under their design, under their specific needs. And we ultimately, as a system, we're not doing that. So I said, how do I exist looking at this from the outside, bringing my engineer mindset to support? And I built this tool to support my family, which was kind of the precursor of our blueBell Connect technology that did a few things. Firstly, it enabled all caregivers for my grandmother. So all my family, the multiple home care companies, multiple companion care companies, to all communicate. To everyone could understand what's going on. How do we ensure that we're all working together if we're not talking, right? It just seems like common sense to me. And then the second thing is, how do we ensure that we're actually doing things that matter to my grandmother and my grandmother likes? Sometimes we're trained in these models of care that say, this is how you care for this person. This is something that you do. But that doesn't consider the person-specific need of the individual. That you may say, let's talk about animals and gardening, and let's look at pictures of barns. And I hear this example often. That's great, but if the person had a traumatic experience growing up on a farm, you're going to cause problems. So how do we ensure that the people caring are actually being, reflective of the needs of the person. So the second piece our tool ended up building was giving personalized specific supports for the person that's living with dementia. So our tool that I ended up building, it takes, their clinical diagnosis. Do they have frontal temporal dementia, Lewy bodies, Alzheimer's, vascular dementia, whatever it is? What's their clinical diagnosis? What is their personal specific traits? So where did they grow up? What's their education? What's their religion? What was kind of their lived personal experience? What's their likes? What's their dislikes? All these kind of pieces that build out this profile for the person. And then what is their cultural identity? Well, that was a big important piece, because if you told my grandmother to do Tai Chi, it wouldn't have ended well, right? My grandmother would not have wanted that. My grandmother had no connection to that thing. And I've heard this in multiple communities. That's one of the supports that they say for people with dementia to do. Like that, for some people, I'm sure that works great. For my grandmother, who was raised to, a dad who was a member of the Legislative Assembly in Manitoba, and it wouldn't have worked to an English settler family. It wouldn't work. It certainly wouldn't have worked on my grandmother on reserve. So we built this tool so no matter who the caregiver is, they can get the proper supports, how they need it, when they need it. And that was important for the people looking after my grandma, so we can all care for my grandmother the best way. Like I said before, the company was made for my grandmother, and that's just what I was trying to do, is make sure that my grandmother's life was best, because I love my grandma more than anything on this planet, and my best way of honoring her was to go and build a company, ensure the people around her are doing what is objectively best.
One of the things, you had mentioned was, with the Indigenous communities, that there's really kind of a crisis there in terms of, when we were talking offline, in terms of support for them. And I've heard that from many. I'm in Minnesota, so we have a lot of tribes here too. And I think work has started to happen in that area, but breaking into it sometimes when you're not part of the tribe, part of the culture, can be difficult as well. So what can you identify for us what kind of needs you saw for people? And given you're part of the community, I would imagine it's probably a little bit easier to connect on that level.
Caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest journeys, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm Allison Schreier, and my experience caring for my husband inspired me to create Zinnia, a therapeutic streaming service designed to support people living with dementia and reduce caregiver stress. Zinnia offers research-backed videos intentionally created for people with dementia, engaging, calming, and easy to follow. Whether you need to ease agitation, create moments of joy, or make daily routines smoother, Zinnia is here to help. Family and professional caregivers use our content to turn challenges into opportunities for connection. Accessible by subscription on mobile devices and connected TVs, Zinnia is simple to use whenever you need it. Because when caregiving feels easier, life feels better. Go to zinniatv.com and sign up for a free trial today. Use the code RESOURCE for 15% off an annual Zinnia subscription.
So we have to look at it from a 40,000-foot view before we can really get into the nuance of what's actually the day-to-day problems. Okay. So in Canada, there's 1.8 million Indigenous people. Indigenous within Canada is categorized in 3 different ways. So we have status First Nations, so people that are tied to a specific reservation and their family is tied to a government document called the Indian Act. We also have Métis, and essentially they were status First Nation people back in the day, but they ended up getting what's called scrip, and they basically sold their Indian rights away, and they were the children of settler European folks. So they're kind of the European hybrid sort of an approach. They've ended up getting their own unique culture. And then the third one would be Inuit, and that's the folk up in the northern parts of the country. So we have these 3 different distinct Indigenous entities, Indigenous cultures. that represent that 1.8 million. And when we look at it from a overall Indigenous support, some of the dynamics and circumstances are different depending on them. So it's important at first to really get a context of that. So I said there's 1.8 million Indigenous people. That accounts for 5% of the Canadian population. So it's a decent sized chunk of the population. But what we're seeing though is that across Canada, the Alzheimer's Society of Canada is projecting in their landmark study 2 report that between now and 2050, we're supposed to see a 273% increase of prevalence of dementia for First Nations, Indigenous, and Métis individuals. 273% increase in prevalence. This is contrasted to 187% for the general Canadian population. So simply speaking, that's almost a twofold more prevalence mathematically, which is significant.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, it's interesting, Lori, because there's lots of reasons as what we can possibly attribute this to. But if we go back, like, first off, our elders historically weren't making it to that age. We had a lot of health issues that are preventing it. 2006, less than 5% of the Indigenous population was over the age of 65. By 2016, it ended up being 7.3. By 2036, they're estimating it to be over 15%. So we're seeing this increase of people getting older, which increases, the prevalence of why we're seeing dementia increasing. But we're also seeing other things that are kind of contributing it. Like in Alberta, so where I live, dementia rates are 34% higher than the general Albertan population. Alberta's got higher dementia prevalence than the rest of the country. So specifically here, we see 34% higher. Against
That's a huge number too.
Oh, it's crazy. And the interesting one is one of the only demographics that sees more men with dementia than women isn't Indigenous populations.
Really?
Which is, I don't know why, but it's an interesting statistic. There has to be some rationalization there. But yeah, what's really interesting is that this population that in Canada, if you're status First Nations, we've got what's called non-insurable health benefits. So as a status First Nation individual, I have fully funded healthcare. We were talking about Canada having fully funded healthcare for people, but there's limitations to it, right? If you need a wheelchair, if you need prescription, these kind of things it doesn't cover. But as a First Nations person, I can go and get a wheelchair tomorrow if I need it. I can go and get glasses that are covered. I can go and get prescriptions. These sort of, I get psychologists if I need it. These sorts of ancillary supports that we have access to. You would think that by extension of having these supports, it would decrease the prevalence for these folks. Instead, what we're seeing statistically is that it hasn't decreased it.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it has decreased, but we don't necessarily have a starting point to say where it started from and if it did decrease it. But nonetheless, we're seeing that the prevalence is higher. And so Dr. Jennifer Walker and Dr. Lyndon Croshaw really argue that this is all attributed to colonial disruption. So the implications of colonialism is what is causing this ripple effect on dementia. Whether we are talking about intergenerational trauma, residential school problems, whether we talk about substance abuse, whether we're talking about inequity to access to care, maybe it's trepidation to engage with the healthcare system. There's tons of externalities that are existing that are making it possibly the reason why we're seeing this increase. Like First Nations people access to healthcare. Like I said, we have this supports, we have this care. But I know sometimes if you are caring for your family, you're a cookum or a grandmother, and you're caring for your grandchildren and you're caring for them, but you need to get supports. So you have non-insurable health benefits will get you a bus to bring you into town to go and get all your checkups, doctor's appointments, but they don't cover off what's going to happen to the kids that are under your care, the grandkids are under your care. So you're not just going to leave the kid on their own. You just don't go to the appointments because you can't leave this person, right? The person that's under your care. And So it's kind of a missed opportunity there that these individuals that need the support, they sometimes want the support, but they can't access that same support. Um, Additionally, sometimes there's, like I said, there's trepidation even engaging with the physicians or healthcare systems. There's an interesting report came out, I think, 2023, and it was by Dr. Pamela Roach and her team at University of Calgary. And what they found is between 10 and 25% of practicing Alberta physicians have reported explicit anti-Indigenous bias. Between 10 and 25% of practicing Alberta physicians have reported themselves explicit anti-Indigenous bias. And overall, they found Alberta physicians have a moderate implicit anti-Indigenous bias. No wonder they're going to have trepidations towards engaging with the health system. If you go in there and you're judged, you're going to have problems. Are you familiar with the case of Brian Sinclair? Have you heard this story?
Why don't you go ahead? Because I'm not sure if I have or not. So go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So quite a few years ago, there was a guy named Brian Sinclair. He was a guy who was in the 70s, I believe. And Brian was in a wheelchair. You know, he had both his legs amputated, and he was having issues. So he wheeled himself into the hospital to get checked in. He said, "You know what? I need help. I need to get looked at." This is a First Nations fella in Winnipeg, in downtown Winnipeg Hospital. So he wheels himself in to go and get checked out. And what ended up happening was they said that, and this is all internal documentation, that they assumed he was either a homeless guy or he was drunk. And so they let him sit there for 34 hours in the emergency room in Winnipeg. 34 hours, a man in a wheelchair, First Nation man, legs amputated, and sitting there trying to get help, trying to get support. He ended up dying in that emergency room. He was there for somewhere between 2 and 7 hours before the staff recognized that something is wrong with this guy. Rigor mortis set in. He was there. He died. And was there just sitting there dead because they went check. Turns out he had a catheter and it was blocked. And that's what caused all these problems.
Oh,
but the
God.
system didn't look after him. That is one of many examples, Lori, of what I see when I talk to communities. I hear communities. Talk to another person, Lori, who they live on reserve, and their mother is in one of these institutionalized care facilities, and they want to pull her out because they're always saying not nice things to her. Sometimes her stuff goes missing. Sometimes they're just not looking after her. They're not giving her the attention that she needs. And whether or not you're saying that that's happening to everybody in there, which is a problem in itself, or you're saying because she's a First Nations woman, it's happening. Again, it's a problem, but we're not appropriately addressing the problem. And all these things are compounding for the problems the First Nations are experiencing. And then we also don't really know how do we navigate, how do we support it? It's a complicated issue, Lori. So in Canada, there's like 687 different First Nations. That's just for status First Nations folk. That's not talking about Métis settlements or Inuit communities or any of these kind of things. That's just status reservations, right? Which is a ton. So there's a bunch of different culture and stuff in there. Whether you talk about Cree, or Plains Cree, or Mountain Cree, whether you talk Swampy Cree, there's a bunch of different kind of Cree. And the cultural identity is different. It's not the same across all. So how do we address it systematically across all these domains becomes complicated. And this is the issue that some of these folks like Dr. Pamela Roach, Dr. Jennifer Walker, Dr. Jacqueline, all these folks are trying to navigate is how do we do this? How do we provide Indigenous specific care for this group of people that's not getting the support that they need? And there's also trepidation to accessing this system, and the general provincial and IHB supports aren't working. So how do we care for it? And I like how I kind of approach it, and I kind of support because I have communities reach out and say, "Hey, uh, we need help. We don't know how to address it, and we see these things that are going on, and we need a Indigenous specific supports." And we're very blessed. To our technology is fundamentally based on Indigenous ontology. So Indigenous ways of knowing, Indigenous specific context that can help train it and support. So we're incredibly blessed that communities trust us to support them in that endeavor, because it's few and far between, honestly, of the supports that are out there to truly support that demographic.
Caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest journeys, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm Allison Schreier, and my experience caring for my husband inspired me to create Zinnia, a therapeutic streaming service designed to support people living with dementia and reduce caregiver stress. Zinnia offers research-backed videos intentionally created for people with dementia, engaging, calming, and easy to follow. Whether you need to ease agitation, create moments of joy, or make daily routines smoother, Zinnia is here to help. Family and professional caregivers use our content to turn challenges into opportunities for connection. Accessible by subscription on mobile devices and connected TVs, Zinnia is simple to use whenever you need it. Because when caregiving feels easier, life feels better. Go to zinniatv.com and sign up for a free trial today. Use the code RESOURCE for 15% off an annual Zinnia subscription.
Yeah, it really has been one that's been left behind in a lot of ways. And, I look at our culture here. I mean, we've in the U.S. is really a mixing pot. And I think there's so many different cultures that we're not addressing properly. I mean, and we can't, they'll develop trials and try to pull people into trials, but nobody's coming to the trials because, again, the lack of trust and the lack of knowledge and the lack of dignity, and no one's asking the right questions. Like, what do you need from us? What do you want from us? What would be helpful for you? Mm-hmm. And again, you can't really have those conversations if they don't feel comfortable with you. You're not going to get to the heart of it. And so you need that authentic connection that says, I see you, I see the needs, but I don't know how best to serve you. And we can't do that without your knowledge, without your mm-hmm. input. And that is just critical. And I think so often our governments at a high level just decide this is what it's going to be, and it's a one size fits all. And it doesn't work like that. Mm-hmm. And, mm-hmm. to hear, the doctors saying, I'm not as good as I should be. I do have a bias. I mean, that's just heartbreaking. But I'm also appreciative of the honesty, that they're admitting that. And then to hear about, Brian dying and not being recognized and that's just sickening. It's just... Yeah.
It's so sad, right? And I mean, there's something, Lori, that we're seeing. I have a lot of folks reach out and say, I want to support this community. How can I do it? I want to get in there. And I'm like, that's great. I am so glad you want to be in there. But you also have to understand they may not want you in there, right? There is a lot of trepidation towards outsiders coming in and solving the problem, right? That's typically how a lot of these problems were instigated and created. I mean, the residential schools is a terribly great example. Like, we're going to take your kids away and we're going to civilize them. We are going to take the Indian out of the child. Like, that was the objective of these institutions. Mm-hmm. And you had no choice but to trust the institution to move forward and solve the problem. And it didn't do it, and these people were harmed, and you have intergenerational trauma and problems that were caused by trust in the system. So just saying, I'm going to go in or you're just going to go in and solve this problem, like, we got a savior complex here happening, and that's a problem. But even just when we look at data, like, take a step back and even look at, if you want to be a researcher and support Indigenous health research, like, there's a data thing there because you may have the best intentions towards supporting this community, but how are we as First Nation people actually going to trust you with our data to make sure it's actually going to be used to help us appropriately? There's a guy, I can't remember his name right now, but he, he was a professor at University UBC, and he did research on arthritis with specific First Nation in BC, and he ended up taking that data, and he went to I think it was Oxford, and then he went to University of Utah and some of these other institutions, like quite good institutions, and he took that Indigenous data and he used it for his own purposes to look at evolutionary transition of people across countries and all this kind of stuff. And they're like, "What are you doing, dude? Like, we consented for this arthritis test, and you did this, and you took that same data with them everywhere." Or are you aware of how the maybe not because you're in the States, but we have a Canada food guide, which says you need like a plate like this much of whatever vegetables, this much meat, and the whole thing, right? Do you know how the Canada one came about?
Mm-mm.
It was done through testing on residential schools. So these kids that were residential schools, in certain ones, they would say, you're going to have this much grains. This one, you said this much vegetable. This one, you're going to have no protein. This one, you'll have none of this. And that's how they tested what the perfect ratio was, by testing on these kids in residential schools. Like Adolf Hitler
Yeah.
literally used the reservation systems in Canada as a lesson of how he can be most effective in his treatment of the Jewish population. Adolf Hitler literally, in the Nazi Party, literally used Indian reservation systems as a tool to learn of what, based on what worked, which is crazy. So obviously the First Nations individuals have this trepidation or fear towards it. And I understand why you would have that trepidation. And it's a complex issue that we're seeing within communities. I think it's not discussed enough. And I don't know whether there's additional stigma, whether there's fear, whether it's you don't necessarily know. I mean, it probably is a combination of all of it, honestly.
Yeah. I just think of with AI getting involved with so much stuff too, getting accurate information and input. One side of me loves AI, and the other side is really like watching it with an evil eye, to make sure it's ethical and all of those types of things, because I think there can be so much miscommunication that's done. Let's talk a little bit about blueBell Connect, and you kind of highlighted a little bit on how it works for gathering information, but how does it really help solve caregivers' needs, when they're caring for somebody with dementia?
Yeah, so I talked about the story of this caregiving island. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of caregivers, they do what they think is best. They care the best that they can.
Mm-hmm.
But everyone is on their own little island. We're doing the best we can. I will try and communicate information where I think it's important, what I think needs to be conveyed. But maybe we miss the mark. Maybe we're just too busy and we forget to send the message. Who's ultimately left on the hook that's now going to end up possibly, feeling the negative effects of that? The person living with dementia, right? The person being cared for. So my analogy about this Caregiving Island is, why are we having everyone existing on our own individual islands? Why do we not have it where everyone has a bridge to each other's islands? Why the bridge being, this communication media, this communication platform that enables everyone to communicate simply and understand what each other is doing, understand what works, understand what doesn't work. From a practical perspective, if you are the main caregiver for your loved one and all these people are caring for them, and you have to go to a neurologist appointment, and the neurologist says, "What's happening? What's going on?" You're going to check your phone, you're going to pull it out and say, this is what I'm seeing. He'll probably ask you, what was happening around that time? What else was going on? Is there any sort of, were they having any issues in the washroom maybe that can lead to a UTI? They'll maybe ask these sort of questions. And you go, "Oh, I don't know. I didn't ask that question." And if and it was 2 months ago, you ask them, they're not going to know, right? There's
Yep.
so many things going on, they won't remember. So how do we build a tool that tracks that? gives them the information. And for me, it's the idea like let's build something longitudinally over a longer breadth of information, tracks the information. So if you have to go back and provide this information, we can search what happened around a day or two before, a day or two after. Let's get some context. Tell the physicians. I mean, on my end, I love data, and that's how we make evidence-based decisions. So why are we not giving our physicians the best opportunity? And by doing that, having the information in front of us that we can collect from all these individuals, whether it is home care company A or companion care company B, or just niece that goes and looks. Why are we not using that information to build this knowledge center around this person so we can effectively care for our loved one? It made sense to me to do that, because as a caregiver, that's what I want for my grandma. I want my grandma to get the best care by every physician every time. And that is the only way we can guarantee that will happen, is that those physicians know exactly what happened, when it happened, and what happened around it.
Need a daily spark of hope and direction? Let the Daily Bible app from Salem Media be that spark. This free Android app delivers an uplifting verse each morning, plus reading plans, devotions, and trusted podcasts from leaders like Joyce Meyer and Rick Warren. Prefer to listen instead? The Daily Bible app reads verses, reading plans, and chapters aloud, handy for the headphones moment of your day. Choose from versions like ESV, NIV, KJV, and more, and bookmark favorites to revisit later. Share inspiring messages with loved ones right from the app. Feel God's presence in every notification. Search for Daily Bible app on Google Play and begin your day with hope, purpose, and peace.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of it too with physicians is they're not asking for caregivers to collect that information or how they go about doing that. And that's been my experience with my mom of 30 years. And now, she's been gone 12, and now I'm dealing with somebody else. No one's ever asked me to record anything. I mean, I know because I'm in the field and to try to monitor and stuff. No one's ever recommended, an app or a tool to help with this process. And so, to me, part of the problem is getting to the doctors, because they don't even know what's available to help people do this. And I know, like early on with my mom, I probably was looked at like a pain in the butt. Oh, it's Lori again, and she's going to send us an email, or she's going to want to talk before her appointment. Well, you need to do that. If you're going to have an effective 15-minute meeting, you need to know ahead of time, because not everything can or should be said in front of the person with dementia, in my opinion, so that it is dignified and depending on where the state is, or to even help protect and keep things smooth at home for the caregivers. If I go in and say, they really shouldn't drive anymore, I'm going to have a horrible, probably couple of weeks, because they will remember that and be attacked. But if the doctor says that, it's going to be approached really different. And I just see such a lack of understanding of what family needs by the doctors, and the wealth of knowledge that the care partners of all levels have to make their job easier, to really, because most of them haven't been through it, and they don't understand, the emotions, the exhaustion, the frustration, the complications with communication. I remember trying to keep everybody up to date. And that's exhausting in and of itself, versus if everyone can just go in and kind of take a peek and then add to it. Or even within families, you can have people that don't see the need. I don't really need to document that they ate or that they didn't sleep, because they're not understanding the big picture, because somebody over here is taking care of it. And the essential piece that they have of the puzzle. And I don't know if you would agree with that or not.
100%. I also would argue that you're better off to start recording before it's needed. It's kind of the idea, like you and I both driving where it's icy and snowy, right? Yep. We drive in crappy weather a lot of the year, right? And it's the idea, like, am I going to brake when it's too late, or should I start slowing down? I see black ice up there. I should start slowing down in advance so I'm not slipping and sliding here and going to the back of somebody. I would argue the exact same analogy in this care environment. Like, we should be starting documenting this and tracking this. If we start seeing, hey, something is up, let's just start keeping track of it, seeing if there's any commonalities, common denominator, like what's going on, so we can, even if I don't ever need to do anything with it, at least we have the information if we do. If I love my loved one enough to care for them, I want to do what's best for them, so I'm going to give them the best chance of success. Same as, in my case, my grandmother gave me the best chance at success. So that's, for my approach, that's what it comes down to. Like, let's do this thing in advance. Even if I don't need information, it's there.
Yeah, and it could be little things from sleeping patterns, and they didn't get much sleep. They were up all night long, and so they're crabby or they're tired. Well, who wouldn't be? That's kind of an after effect, of that. Or if they're having incontinence problems, oh, I didn't really realize they were drinking that much before they went to bed. Or throughout the day, or getting somebody on a schedule just to visit the restroom. A lot of this stuff can be, handled really simply if you, like you said, if you have the data, with that. Are they taking their medications? Well, I told them to. Well, I told them to, and they took them, are two different things. And so, there's just so many things. Or maybe it's a person, that's triggering them. And it could be a family member, it could be a friend, or, it could be a lot of different things that's triggering them in a bad mood. There's something with that relationship. There's somewhere that's happened, and maybe it's not even happening today. It happened in the past, but it's still triggering. How do we deal with that? And, or lighting, or hot and cold, or, the sound, all of those things can be major, major triggers that we're not applying. That's one of the things that I'm really working on right now, is what I call a sensory care plan, and getting people to look for the triggers. What is causing it? Because so often it's so simple to change, but if you're not looking for the triggers, if you're just looking at the problem, and that's usually the phase we're in, where it's a problem for us. But this can be used in reverse as well. It's like, oh, this created a lot of joy. Maybe we should do this more often. Those things are possible too. So, I'm on board with you. I think it's critical for everyone to understand their role, and how we all play off one another, and how the person with dementia is playing off each of us.
Totally. An interesting analogy or kind of thought process is, the sundowning, right? So, and sometimes the experience of what they're going through maybe manifests as they are a child. You've had Glenna on your show, I believe, right?
Yep.
And so when she talks about the fact that her mom was rocking her when she was with her, thinking that she was some random person rocking Glenna as a baby, right? That's the lived experience this person is in. If you're just a random caregiver, you may not understand the dynamic of some of these personas or layers of what this person is understanding their reality to be. So how do we ensure that those caregivers that don't know those things, don't understand the experience of Glenna's lived experience as a baby, how do we ensure that they know these things? Because they're super important. So for us, we have a function that tracks, like, who are the important people in this person's life. So if they start calling out this name, or talking about this person, or in this dynamic, hey, that thing said this person, that's who they're talking about. That's the lens they're talking about. They must be 18 and living on the farm, or whatever it is.
Exactly. And those are important pieces to be able to put together, and to be able to step into their world and understand it, instead of sometimes, you see family and even staff at times making fun because it's not making sense in their reality, but it's totally real in the person with dementia's reality. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about is, on social media, you've been kind of showing the journey of your endurance racing, and to raise awareness about dementia. Why don't you talk a little bit about that and how you think that helps people look at things a little bit differently?
Caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest journeys, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm Allison Schreier, and my experience caring for my husband inspired me to create Zinnia, a therapeutic streaming service designed to support people living with dementia and reduce caregiver stress. Zinnia offers research-backed videos intentionally created for people with dementia, engaging, calming, and easy to follow. Whether you need to ease agitation, create moments of joy, or make daily routines smoother, Zinnia is here to help. Family and professional caregivers use our content to turn challenges into opportunities for connection. Accessible by subscription on mobile devices and connected TVs, Zinnia is simple to use whenever you need it. Because when caregiving feels easier, life feels better. Go to zinniatv.com and sign up for a free trial today. Use the code RESOURCE for 15% off an annual Zinnia subscription.
Yeah, so for me, I started in this kind of journey in late 2024. I was almost 40 pounds heavier. I was not in great shape. And I was like, long story short, but the wife made me get a gym membership. And I was like, I can do this thing. I'm going to spend money appropriately. So I started just training, and I was like, I'm going to do a triathlon because that'll actually make this worth my money. So I set up a triathlon. And then it's kind of scaled up to that point where we are early 2026 kind of thing. And so we're like 16, 17 months from that point. I've taken it for the opportunity that this isn't just endurance racing for me. It's the opportunity to highlight the fact that person-specific care is important. And I use racing as kind of analogy for that. I did the hypothermic half marathon here in Edmonton, I don't know, a few months back, and we ran a minus 26 Celsius. It was quite chilly, but we did a half marathon in cold temperature. And I was doing videos as I was doing this run, and you feel free to check out our YouTube channel at blueBell Village to see some of these videos, or any other social media platform. But I talk about, like, if you're doing these runs and you've got a pain or you've got something going on, we're not going to keep following this plan. We're not going to keep following what I said I was going to do yesterday to finish this race. I'm going to adapt to what I need to do. And why do we not do that in dementia care? Why are we fixing our process to one time point and never adapting to what the person needs? And so I use racing to really bring up these analogies. And then I also, as I'm doing the races, I've got like for my triathlon stuff, I got a custom tri-suit that talks about restoring the personhood and independence of those living with dementia. So I've had people mid-race talk to me about their dementia experience and perspective. And for runners, that keeps you in your zone too, which means your heart rate is lower. So that's great from a running perspective because I can have conversations that helps the race. But from a relational perspective, it's good to talk about, this is a normal thing. How do we adapt it? What does person-specific care look like? And then ultimately just all these things break down the Alzheimer's and the stigma that comes with it. I love meeting folks on race day that have been through this journey in caregiving. And we can talk about it. We can just help them navigate that journey. There's also some incredible folks, that have Alzheimer's that are doing these races. There's a guy in, I think, Florida who he still, I don't know if he still is, but he was, after his Alzheimer's diagnosis, was still doing full Ironmans, which is crazy, right? But he's still doing it. I can't remember his name, but yeah, he's still doing Ironmans. And so for me, it's like, how do I use my platform to do these races to bring awareness and create a dialogue regarding, dementia is a thing. It's something we got to deal with, but let's not let the system force us into doing it the same way every time. Let's adapt to what the person needs. Let's see what that looks like. And I think endurance running is a great analogy for it. And as I'm ramping up for full Ironman, that's the objective, right? Is to use the increased craziness of these races as a platform to bring a voice to these folks that oftentimes are you have Alzheimer's, you have dementia, let's put you aside. You don't need to talk. We'll talk for you. Like, how do we use this as a way to give them a voice and bring awareness to what they're going through and the impact that they want to have through person specific care. So that's kind of what's it's in it for me. And it's really cool, to, get to connect with folks that do a similar idea with me, whether it's Stephanie Fauquier out of Toronto, who did 10 triathlons in 13 weeks in one summer in 2023 to raise $1 million for Alzheimer's. Whether it's Jason Beauchamp, who raised $20 million for Alzheimer's research in the United States by running marathons in every single continent. Or whether it's Spencer Klein, who biked 3,700 miles across the United States to bring awareness for frontotemporal dementia like his dad had. It's how do we bring those things forward and connect with those people so we're collaboratively working forward. And thankfully our podcast, The Dementia Collective, gives us an opportunity to bring that endurance racing with the voices together.
That's cool. Do you know Anthony Copeland Parker?
No, but I would love to.
Okay, I'll introduce you. He is so cool. He and his wife, Kat, run all over, and he's been pushing her in a wheelchair even, if I'm not mistaken. But they were always runners, and that was something that they just continued to do. And he brings her, with him, and it's just kind of a fascinating story. He's written a book, Running All Over the World, Our Race Against Early Onset. And I had him on back in 2023, but I know, I think I've had him on since then as well. And of course, their journey, has just continued. But talk about an advocate and just modifying anything he can to make it work so his wife could still participate, because that was their thing.
Yeah, that's so cool. I'd love if you can connect me, Lori, with them. I'd love to have them on our podcast, The Dementia Collective. I think that would be really cool. So.
Okay, why don't you talk about your podcast and tell people a little bit what they can expect there?
Yeah, so we, like most things in my life, I didn't expect myself to have a podcast. Lo and behold, we have a podcast. And it started as a webinar with Karen Tyrell, and it evolved into the point of where we have some really, really cool folks coming on and talking about it. I don't tend to get into the clinical pieces because as a caregiver, I didn't care about the clinical, to be frank. Like, I'm just trying to care for my grandmother. So what do I need to know going forward? And what can I do to help look after them? And we bring on folks, everyone kind of in the space. So whether we have caregiver experts, whether it's Teepa Snow, Dr. Natalie Edmonds, Carrie Alberts, these kind of folks, whether we have innovators, whether we have people living with dementia, whether we have politicians on, endurance athletes. We have a whole gambit of different folks talking about their experiences within this space. And I think I like to think I bring it at a unique perspective that just is very conversational and relational. And I think it's kind of fun, and we've evolved since that point, that we also are now doing some shorter bonus episodes for folks. Like we released one last week. Do you like Star Trek, Lori?
I'm not a big Star Trek person, to be honest.
Oh, Lori.
I know. You can't be everything to everybody,
That's fair. So we released a bonus episode last week, and it's done quite well, actually. And it was it was exploring how the story of Sarek, so Spock's dad, from a Next Generation episode, is an allegory for aging and stigmatized care in our aging system and aging culture. And so I've kind of expanded out from just these interviews on the podcast to also like an exploration of what does aging mean on a truly logic society, and how does that impact us as a culture and our stigma. So yeah, I would love for people to follow the Dementia Collective on all those podcast apps. So whatever, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever else they appear. And then on YouTube at blueBell Village. And then we have Instagram and Facebook and all those things. So I'd love for you guys to follow. Lori will be coming on here shortly as well. So you'll be able to hear Lori's voice on the other side of the table. So that would be amazing.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That'll be fun. It's so nice to see all the different podcasts that are out there. When I first started, there really wasn't wasn't any. And I like you, I didn't volunteer to be in here. I got in here because of my mom living with it. And, just look and like you, I didn't necessarily need all the clinical stuff. It's like, just how do we get by day to day and make everybody's life, a little easier, a little happier, and so it's funny how many people with the lived experience have jumped in and are realizing their voices are important, because there's so much to share, and not everybody's going to find me or you. So we need everybody else, to be able to build the resources and the trusted voices for people to be able to find. Now, as far as the blueBell Connect, now, is that an app that people just download, or how do they?
Caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest journeys, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm Allison Schreier, and my experience caring for my husband inspired me to create Zinnia, a therapeutic streaming service designed to support people living with dementia and reduce caregiver stress. Zinnia offers research-backed videos intentionally created for people with dementia, engaging, calming, and easy to follow. Whether you need to ease agitation, create moments of joy, or make daily routines smoother, Zinnia is here to help. Family and professional caregivers use our content to turn challenges into opportunities for connection. Accessible by subscription on mobile devices and connected TVs, Zinnia is simple to use whenever you need it. Because when caregiving feels easier, life feels better. Go to zinniatv.com and sign up for a free trial today. Use the code RESOURCE for 15% off an annual Zinnia subscription.
It's a web-based app, so they can go to our website. If they go bluebellconnect.ca, they'll be able to access the information. There's a sign-up option that you can sign up, fill the form, and you can do it. The cool thing about it, and the thing that really resonated with me when we were talking about like commercializing it, was the idea that a lot of the times care teams are complicated, right? And care providers are already charging families to do it. So for us, if a family member is using it, if it's just the family, there's a monthly subscription fee. But if they have a care provider looking after them, so a home care company, companion care, whatever it is, then they bring in one of those providers, then the provider covers the entire cost. The family gets it for free. So it's really incentivized for the family to, want to use this thing. And then the nice thing is it's 24/7 on the fly when you need it. It's a web-based app. You just sign on your phone and you can access it, because oftentimes, things happen and you need an answer now, and I don't have time to take a 3-hour course to learn. ChatGPT's got issues, and Google doesn't understand your specific case. So we really kind of fit in that space where you need support. We got supports. Our tool provides personalized activities. Do you want an activity? Do you want maybe something to do? Maybe an emotionally supporting piece. Maybe you're having a hard time with some sort of discussion, and you need that support technique. Or things are really ramped up and you're having a hard time navigating this relationship, and you need help on how do we bring this person down and moderate this conversation. It gives de-escalation techniques as well. So it's really, we kind of made it to support the unique lived experience that someone living with dementia would go through.
So when you say like the home health care would cover the cost, is that all over, or is that just with specific companies? And is that just in Canada, or is that international?
So they would cover it no matter where they are. I don't know any home care companies in the States off the top of my head. But let's say that you have Joe Smith that's being cared for by home care company X, whatever the name is. Then home care company X would take the invoice and cover it off for them, so that they would cover it, and then they would also get access to it as well. And if, as the care team expands and more people are caring for this loved one, then, and say there's another home care and another companion care, then all those organizations can all contribute to that collective knowledge repository, and they can all gain the benefit from that, rather than just one organization have their own data and be able to collect.
I guess here in the U.S., I haven't heard of them picking up the tab for different apps and things like that. That's why I was asking.
Yeah, we've seen it across multiple regions. Um, Typically, it's the family is inquiring about it, and it's one of those. If you want to take on our care, this is one of those expectations. That's kind of the dynamic I've heard families using it through.
Well, that's good to know. Um, Anything else that we haven't covered at all that you'd like to discuss?
I don't know, Lori. I think we've talked about a lot of things. I mean, um, I think the other piece of what I do is how do I use my academic work to increase Indigenous entrepreneurship and health. I've like we've talked about all the issues before with Indigenous folk and health. For me, it's like how do we increase the prevalence of my community members opening up ventures in health so we are cared for by our own people rather than relying on non-Indigenous people to care. I mean, it was something like 70% of the people that are billing back psychology and counseling supports through non-insurable health benefits are not Indigenous, nor have they had any Indigenous training. So like that's pretty wild. The number's something like that. I can't remember exactly, but it's pretty close to that. So it's pretty wild. So how do we get Indigenous folk into these spaces? And that's kind of what my doctoral work looks at. And I'm passionate about that. And everything I do is really across all the domains we talked about, disciplines talked about. Like, how do I drive community support and make sure that the people that need the support are cared for? That's what's important.
Well, it should be important to all of us. It's critical, and so I commend you for the work that you're doing and the approach that you're taking, and you're really making a big difference in so many people's lives. And I'm sure Grandma's shining down on you with a big old smile on her face, going, "That's my grandson," doing all this cool stuff. So, again, people can visit your website, bluebellvillage.ca. And you are also on LinkedIn individually, and then also as blueBell Village as well. There, if I'm not mistaken,
we're on pretty much every social.
Okay.
We technically have a TikTok. We don't really use it that much, but we have a TikTok technically. But we're on everything, including Podchaser. So we're expanding the things that we're on. Hopefully, just getting more folks to read it and learn what we're doing. So that's what's important. So.
Well, isn't Podchaser too where people can go to a multitude of podcasts and find where you're located? So totally. A lot of people just think Apple and Spotify, but there's so many of them out there that everybody doesn't know about too.
Yeah, Podchaser is kind of cool. I found out about it the other day. They actually reached out to me, and so maybe 2 weeks ago, and it's cool because someone like yourself and myself, where we've been on many podcasts over the years, right? And it's repository and like it's kind of like the IMDb of it. So if you say, I really like what Lori is saying, let's see what other podcasts she has appeared as a guest on, and you can hear her talk about this from a different lens. It's kind of cool from that perspective to understand these creators, as they call it, where they can talk about it more ways if you really resonate with it. And you say, I want to hear more of Lori because I only ever hear her on the interview side. I want to hear more her talk about her stuff. So what other interviews has she been on? Maybe it's All Home Care Matters. Maybe it's Dementia Collective, whatever it is. It gives you opportunity to really learn more about these people in a easier way, because sometimes, the podcast or Spotify or YouTube algorithm searching is cumbersome.
Yep, to say the least, and ever changing.
Oh, yeah.
Well, again, thank you for being a guest on our show. In wrapping up, I do always encourage people, if you're looking for a webmaster, check out Q for Good. That's who I use. They are wonderful. They really like people who are doing socially conscious movements and stuff, and they're super easy to deal with, economical, and communicate great, and meet deadlines. It's like, who would have thought,
So important, right?
I know. And they speak by simple language. I don't like the blue screen and the black holes and all of those types of things in the coding. And they really make it easy for me on that. But again, visit Andrew, at blueBell, and, check him out. And then I always ask our audience to be a giver of hope. Like, click, and share. It takes no time. It doesn't cost you a thing. But it's powerful to get this information into your sphere of influence, because let me tell you, there's people out there that need to hear this that you don't even know are dealing with it, because people still aren't comfortable talking about this. And the more they see the easier it's going to be for them to reach out and not be so scared. So let them know that you care and that this is something important to you as well. So in wrapping up, like I said, Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it. And again, don't forget to check out Alzheimer Speaks with our free educational resources, and also Dementia Map, which blueBell is part of as well there. So thanks for being a member with us there. We'll see you guys all next week. Bye now.
Attention seniors. Are you looking for a community that offers incredible benefits and stands up for your values? Look no further than AMAC. With an AMAC membership, you'll enjoy exclusive discounts on insurance, travel, dining, and shopping. Stay informed with 6 issues a year of our award-winning AMAC magazine, delivering trusted news and valuable insights. But that's not all. AMAC is committed to defending America's future by directly bringing the voices of our more than 2 million members to our elected officials. Join a community that cares about your needs and your values. For a limited time, we're offering a 1-year membership for only $1. Yes, just $1 for a year of incredible benefits and advocacy. Don't wait. Take advantage of this special offer and join AMAC today. Visit amac.us/join now. That's amac.us/join now.